Why are you wearing that poppy?
It's okay now. We're out of the Jehovah's Witness religion.
Are you sure? According to the memory bank, poppies support war. Do you want to support war? Each time you buy a poppy, you are supporting the war effort. Your donation goes to making more war.
Where do you get all that stuff from? Like, where do you come up with those ideas, anyways?
My stored memory on this subject comes from the Jehovah's Witness religion.
Well, I can see that we're going to have to straighten up your thinking. So let's review this a little bit more. Welcome back. So I spent 30 years in the Jehovah's Witness religion, and today I was at a loss. Remembrance Day, uh, November 11th. And Remembrance Day is celebrated all over the world, as we know it. We're going to look at where that comes from. But as a Jehovah's Witness, we were programmed to ignore this day. We were programmed to believe that this was not necessarily a day we'd want to pay much attention to. And I was curious where we got that programming from, and I had to do a little bit of digging, and finally I found it here in the JW Jehovah's Witness org, jw.org website, and I found it under "Why Don't Jehovah's Witnesses Celebrate Certain Holidays?" Now, this article goes on to talk about all kinds of holidays. How do Jehovah's Witnesses determine whether a holiday is acceptable? So, as you'll notice, all holidays, in case you're wondering, all holidays are not acceptable to Jehovah's Witnesses. So, we go all the way down through this article, all the different holidays, and we come to the part that's dealing with Remembrance Day, and it's even further down. They have a lot of holidays that they don't celebrate. So here it is. Does the holiday elevate one nation or ethnic group above others? Well, Remembrance Day doesn't. Bible principle: God is not partial, but in every nation the man who fears him and does what is acceptable to him. So that doesn't apply. Although many Jehovah's Witnesses are fond of their homeland, they avoid celebrations that elevate nations or ethnic groups in the ways described in the following lists. So here's their reasoning: events that honor the armed forces. Rather than advocating war, Jesus told his followers, continue to love your enemies and to pray for those who persecute you. That's the scriptural support they're using. And then they say, therefore, this is their words, therefore, Jehovah's Witnesses do not observe celebrations that honor soldiers, including the holiday that follows. And they go on to give a few of these: Veterans Day, Remembrance Day, Memorial Day. So they're very clear about it, that they do not have any part of this. So that's where I have gotten all that programming from. Um, Honoring rather than advocating war is what they're saying, rather than advocating war. So they feel that Remembrance Day is about advocating war, when really Remembrance Day is completely the opposite. So let's look at this. Remembrance Day in Wikipedia is also known as Poppy Day, owing to the tradition of wearing a remembrance poppy. It's a memorial day observed in the Commonwealth member states since the end of the First World War to honor armed force members who have died in the line of duty. So, just like Jesus died for all of mankind, we honor Jesus' death every year. And for the First World War, there was a treaty signed for the whole world. And in honor of that treaty, in honor of no more war, we all remember that day. And of course, we remember all the veterans that died for us. So, right now, you and I are talking on social media, and we have freedom of speech, and we can say pretty well anything we wish. It has to be, within reason and within the laws there, but we have freedom of speech. So we can talk about what we don't agree with about the Jehovah's Witness in this case, and we can talk about politics or any other thing, because we have freedom of speech. That freedom of speech was actually given to us by the veterans. So we remember that these veterans were fighting for this freedom of speech. And to take it even a step further, in Nazi Germany, when they were persecuting everyone, they were trying to take over. I thought this was interesting. The Nazis' long-term plan was to de-Christianize Germany after the final victory in the war. So could you imagine if that war would have went through and we would have no Christianity in the world because that war went through? So had our veterans not fought in that war also, we would not have the freedom of speech that we have today and that we all enjoy. So let's go back to the Jehovah's Witness picture, and we go back to their one of their articles on protectum freedoms and how, and they go on to talk about all how they protect, how we should be protecting freedoms. And they say in many countries, ethnic minorities who have their rights protected by law often find themselves the object of intolerance. So they go on to talk about intolerance, but yet when they go door to door, and when I went door to door for 30 years, the magazines were not about intolerance. The magazines, the Watchtower and the Awake magazines, were about telling the audience that all the other religions out there are the wrong religion. The only right religion is the Jehovah's Witness religion. And that's what those magazines ultimately say. And some of the articles will even get pretty direct. They're not tolerant at all. There's no tolerance within the Jehovah's Witness religion. In fact, they go on to talk about how it's important that we should be able to talk about our ideas and how they shouldn't be suffocated. And in this article here, but yet that's what they do. As us, as people that speak out, and we have questions, then we get ostracized from their organization. So they go on to talk about this, and it's really the kettle calling the other kettle black, if that's how you say it. But here's what they said in the last part of this. Um, in recent years, authorities have tried to stifle Jehovah's Witnesses in France by not granting them the same advantage of other religions. Recently, the donations received to support of the witness religion activities were heavily taxed. So I thought that was interesting. They brought that up in this article on religious tolerance, and they felt like they were getting targeted in France. Well, I mentioned in some of my other articles that I feel that a lot of the religions should be or could be taxed if they're not doing what they're supposed to do. And what are they supposed to do? Well, it says that right here in James 1 and 27, a religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their affliction and to keep oneself unstained from the world. And the word visit, by the way, means to help and to give some serious help to the orphans and widows. And when we look at the Jehovah's Witness religion, they do not have any programs to help orphans and widows, even within the organization, let alone outside of the organization. All the donations go to building the empire, the kingdom, the buildings, the halls, the Bethels, the movie studio that they're building. That's where all the money goes. None of the money goes to helping orphans and widows, as the Bible says. So this is really probably why some of these countries, like France, are getting together and saying, "Hey, this religion is not a religion. It's not a religion because religions help orphans and widows, and even the Catholic Church helps 10%. So they do help some, and that's a big 10% when you add it up, because there's a lot of Catholics in the world. But the Jehovah's Witnesses do not help. So we talked a little bit about the Nazi persecution in Germany, and I looked this up. I'm not Catholic, and I don't promote, if, as you've seen in my other videos, I don't promote to be part of any religion on earth. But in looking at history, and who fought the wars. And I know Jehovah's Witnesses make a great big deal about the 1500, and all lives are important, but there was 1500 that died on the Jehovah's Witness side in the Nazi Germany. And that was put in the hall of whatever in Jerusalem were the Holocaust Hall, and they made a big deal about it. But here, sometimes we forget about the Jehovah's Witnesses. They didn't fight the war. They didn't help the war. They didn't promote the war. In fact, they helped to cripple the country in a sense that they had to be looked after in prisons and fed and watered in prisons because they wouldn't partake at all in the wars. Yet the Bible does say there's a time for everything. Ecclesiastes clearly says there's a time for peace and there's a time for war. War is not killing, war is not murder. War is how God has moved the nation of Israel all the way through history, was through war. And if we didn't have these wars, we would not have Christianity today. Think about that, friends. It's no different than in the olden days, the ancient days, when God was directing the people. So today we have war, whether we like it or not. And the Jehovah's Witness religion, they really climb on the backs of the European Union and all the governments when there's a war because they're being persecuted. They're martyrs. But they have no part in helping to fight these wars for the freedom of speech. But yet they talk about these freedoms of speeches, protecting freedoms of speeches, and how they have done their part. They feel they've done a big part in making freedom of speech work for them. But that's all due to the veterans. So, therefore, when we look at the veterans and we look at what they did, and we look at all the many people that lost their lives in the war, fighting for these freedoms. So I wanted to figure out how many Catholics. I just picked this one. It says during the Second World War, it's estimated that 3 million Polish Catholics and Christians were murdered. So that's a lot more than 1,500. Here, when we talk about the clergy, it says at least 1,800 members of the Polish clergy were murdered in the Nazi concentration camps. An estimated 3,000 members of the clergy were killed. So this would be like taking all the circuit overseers and the district overseers of the Jehovah's Witness organization and killing them all. And that didn't happen. But that happened to the Catholics. But the Jehovah's Witnesses, when I was in the religion, they made it look like the Catholics were in cahoots with Hitler. That's what they made it look like. And we have to really do a lot of straightening up in our thinking as ex-Jehovah's Witnesses as we go through life again outside the religion when we're awoken. So all of these things I find it makes me angry, to be honest, when I learn these things because I was fooled for all those years. And the poppy is nothing to do with celebrating war or promoting war. It's nothing to do with it. It's like remembering Jesus' death. It's like remembering the death of all those people that have died for us faithfully. So we have this freedom that we're enjoying right now here today. So I want to leave with this. I left just to reaffirm what the poppy means, and here it is. So just join me here.
Important to commemorate and to continue commemorating in the future. The intent behind Remembrance Day is not to glorify war. It's to reflect upon those who paid the ultimate sacrifice. And each year, Canada and other Commonwealth countries use this time of remembrance. And the theme for Remembrance Day is Lest We Forget. We need to remember what happened in the past so we don't revert to those ways in the future.